Good afternoon. Dear Minister, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to begin this event of ours dedicated to the presentation and discussion of the long-awaited book of Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis. Please welcome. By the way, hard copy of the book is on its way to Lithuania, but you can easily find it and read it on official publisher's page. So, saving all of our time, I would like to invite distinguished guests to deliver a welcoming speech. And I invite Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania, Mr. Kęstutis Budrys.
Dear ambassadors, dear colleagues, professor, dear friends, this is a really important event that we are having today, and from many angles, and from the history point of view, from the academical research point of view, also from the point of view of the researches that were also organized with the assistance of Lithuania's government, and overall in the current situation where we are right now as the world. This is the especially important topic, because we are living through some of the processes that we witness here in Lithuania more than 80 years ago, and the ones that led us to the atrocities that happened in this land. And why they are relevant these days, because we are now witnessing once again the big wave of anti-Semitism that is going around the world. Some of it is absolutely unrelated to geopolitical events or to the political events that are happening to Middle East, and some of them have the deeper roots in the societies than we are sometimes thinking of. Talking about Lithuania's research, Lithuanian scholars and the community that was built around it, research that started from the very beginning of independence in 1990, with the analysis, with the different publications, with the events that were organized, exhibitions organized, also in my ministry and elsewhere around the town, also with the memorial sites that were raised in many cities and small towns across Lithuania, and also with the establishment of International Commission for Evaluation of Nazi and Soviet occupation crimes that was led by Emanuelis Zingeris. Everyone knows Emanuelis and knows his work, and that is really important. And within these efforts, we also know Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis, who is doing his research and is still leading Nazi occupation crimes and Holocaust investigation unit within the International Commission. And within the International Commission, there were other scholars that were brought together, both Lithuanian and international scholars, and their work was really fundamental for us to have the basis, to have the fundamentals, and have the material to discuss and to analyze what happened in Lithuania in those years of occupations. So for now we know, and I'm also looking forward to hear from Professor that the very emotions and the very anti-Semitism that was within the society, deep-rooted within the society, was instrumentalized by occupational Nazi forces and also their collaborators locally to the level that led to the very atrocities and the horrible war crimes that were committed here. And all this chain of events, I'm returning back to the beginning of my speech, it's not self-evident in our current society. We still tend to think about it that something happened a long time ago, and there were different people, and the people without education probably, and of course they are not like me. And now when we see the Russia's crimes that are committed in occupied territories of Ukraine, I have this belief that makes me very nervous and anxious about it, that there is something different in our societies and in the very human nature that led to those events. So returning returning back into the history, going to Ukraine and seeing what is happening elsewhere with the anti-Semitism and in general lack of tolerance, I think that we have to return again and again to the studies and research in the Holocaust and go to it both professionally, politically, emotionally, and as the humans. So that's why it's important that we have this new book of Professor published. Looking forward to not only to hear to you, Professor, but also to read it. And that's why we have to continue with this discussion and also elsewhere. And even when we are discussing the very dangerous situations that are ongoing now in the Middle East, dangerous because we are on the very brink of another country that is theocracy, that is ruled by the lunatics. Some of them is about to acquire a nuclear weapon. And within this context, it's even more relevant. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, organizers. Thank you, Lithuanian Institute of History, Library of Mažvydas, and also the International Commission and everyone who made it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And now I would like to invite a member of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, chairman of the International Commission for the Evaluation of the Crimes of Nazi and Soviet occupation regimes in Lithuania, Mr. Emanuelis Zingeris. Please.
We can start without Mr. I am so glad. It's a great day for all of us. Saulius, it's after years and years. We have a summary of all your experience and our commission experience too. Well, some people were in discussion with you from 2016 when we started to think that we should have the basic work who will be more popular to broader audience. Yes, not only to academic audience, but to the broader circles. So from my point of view, Second World War, before, God forbid, we will have the third one. Second World War should be evaluated for the reason of democracy. That's my point. So the reason for German, we just invited, of course, our German friends to be with us together, for German troops in Lithuania, for Lithuanian soldiers, for Americans to defend Lithuania is democracy. So democracy element is the sincere attitude, what happened in the country about everything. Everything what happened in our country and defend that like our legacy, like our treasure to making example how not to behave and how to behave. Who are heroes, who are not. Thank you, Minister, that you met one of the first of your meetings with our commission. Thank you for that. That was your early days being a minister. And absolutely sure that we will be capable to bring the contents to Lithuanian consciousness related to those discoveries who becoming a part of Lithuanian democratic fighting society, fighting for the values and preparing to defend ourselves. We are here 35 kilometers from Belarus borders. And we should prepare ourselves. So our military will be following Sauliaus Sužiedėlio's books, and our heroes, the partisans, who I brought many books about Lithuanian heroic movements after Second World War. Our commission did a fundamental investigation in the Lithuanian heroic uprising against Soviet totalitarian rule, but the 3-4 years of Second World War and the mass killings, collaboration with Nazis by locals, German Marionettenspiel, Nazi Third Reich, in trying to push for collaboration, thousands of people in the killings of neighbors. Everything should be on the table And I'm so glad, I would like to share that with all Ambassador Corp, that we sent with Faina Kuklansky clear letter to Mr. Putin not to touch Holocaust. Stop to imitate fake anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler stand, and let us, victims of Second World War, Holocaust survival family, and my mother was in Nazi concentration camp Stuhlhof. I'm talking in the name of them, who now we have not, probably only a few hundred families here in Lithuania. Stop to use our narrative for imperial use of the Russian Empire. Coming back to our optimistic note, I would like to say that we have everyday struggle, Saulius, in our society, about what you're writing all your life. All your life were dedicated to taking not popular part of the street, saying the true and being patriotic to United States of America and to Lithuania. Patriotic in the sense of knowledge and facts on the table. From that reason, I would like to congratulate you with your life work. Probably I can say that. Share my sympathies with you. You lost your, just a few weeks ago, your brother, Mark Zingeris, were secretary of this commission, where Ronaldas Rečinskas was working. I lost my brother. And we will continue our fight for civil society. And we know that this civil society, I would like to went to the German ambassador and say that is worth to defend together. Well, the sense is maturity of our society. And reconciliation with the past will be done through scrupulous analysis of what happened, with the support of United States, of Germany, and other channels. We have very great community in the commission. Andrew Becker probably is here or not. Jonathan Brandt, the director of EVO, is in our commission. 100th year of anniversary of EVO. Congratulations. That's a very big event for all of us, and we will celebrate in Brussels too. And of course, I would like to congratulate the heroic wife and who is now together of Saulius Sužiedėlis. Madam Sužiedėlis, thank you for supporting your husband all years of his scrupulous work, who not helped him to be extremely popular in all streets of Chicago, but gave for them the right now to say that on my side is the scrupulous analysis and scrupulous truth in the history. So at the same time, I would like to share with you that, of course, we will continue our work. We just came with the commission teachers, 92 from Auschwitz. You can imagine more like 200 tolerance centers in Lithuania, and we continue our work, and I hope that ministry will help us not surrender and continue our not from time to time resistance against some trends in our political society. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And now please welcome Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the State of Israel to the Republic of Lithuania, Hadas Wittenberg Silverstein. Welcome.
Minister Budrys, distinguished guests, dear friends. It is a privilege to join you to mark the publication of Crisis, War and the Holocaust in Lithuania of Professor Sužiedėlis. This book is more than historical account. It is deeply moral act, an effort to face painful truth bravely and to give voice to those whose voices were silent. The Holocaust is not only a Jewish tragedy, it is a human tragedy. And the memory of Holocaust is not just about the past. As the historian Judah Bauer wrote, the Holocaust has to be incorporated into life, into the present and the future, to give it the meaning it didn't have when it occurred. The Holocaust is a warning of what happens when hatred and indifference are allowed to grow. And with your permission, I would like to take a moment to what is happening now in Israel. You're all aware of the war that we have with Hamas and the fact that we still have 53 hostages in the hands of Hamas. We're acting now against Iran. But what we're doing now today is out of necessity, not really out of choice. This radical Iranian regime, like you mentioned, Mr. Minister, is threatening the very existence of the Jewish state. We cannot stay and we will not remain silent when the threat becomes reality with vast missiles and nuclear capabilities. And one more thing. What we are doing today is not only fighting against the problem of Israel. It's really fighting against the problem that the world is facing. Because Iran is a state that's sponsoring terror. Iran is the same state that's helping Russia in its war against Ukraine. And Iran is the one that's keeping terror infrastructure. So this is just a note about, the hard reality of today, and going back to your book. I think that the book is also a tool for education, for moral clarity, and for building a more just future. The book contributes to that mission by shedding light on the events of the Holocaust in Lithuania with honesty and care. And why, you might ask, why do we must continue retelling this story? Perhaps because the versions of past generation grown too simple. History is always a process of sifting, of deciding what is important and what is not important. Over the time, entire elements fall apart and fall away. Revisiting those details deepens and enriches the narrative. In doing so, we might rediscover aspects that earlier generations took for granted or neglected. And perhaps the best reason to engage with this history is not only because this is ours, the Jews, or yours, Lithuanian, but because it is compelling and fascinating. True history challenges us. It unsettles the stories that we grew up with. It complicates our heroes and your heroes, and it forces us to re-examine what we believe. This is exactly why we keep returning to it, because sometimes those treasures and stories that were left in the attic by previous generations is exactly what we need to understand who we are today. So I would like to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to you, Professor, for your work. It offers a chance for Lithuania, for the Jewish community, for all of us to continue the hard and vital work of remembrance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Director of Lithuanian Institute of History, Mr. Aurimas Švedas. Please welcome.
Dear Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants of this event, Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis. Today we will discuss the book Crisis, War and the Holocaust in Lithuania, published by the Academic Studies Press. This book, as it was already mentioned, to a certain extent is the life's work of Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis. In my brief speech, I would like to remember one more time Martynas Zingeris, a writer, public intellectual, and former director of the Vilnius Museum, who has done a lot to make this book happen. And I'm pleased to inform you that the Lithuanian Institute of History and the International Commission for the Evaluation of the Crimes of the Nazi and Soviet occupation regimes in Lithuania have already begun work on the translation of this book into the Lithuanian language. We will organize many presentations and discussions devoted to the questions related to the crisis, the Second World War, and the Holocaust in Lithuania once the book is available into the Lithuanian language. Reflecting on historical experiences is an ongoing effort crucially important for the Lithuanian society. Meanwhile, I wish you all a productive discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Of course, we are aware that some of our guests have. So now we would like to start our discussion with Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis, but just keep in mind that after this discussion, you are really very welcome to stay here and participate with your questions and so on. Now I pass the microphone to my colleague.
Yes, thank you. I want to start our discussion with Professor Saulių Sužiedėlį with the question that you answered actually in your book, but for those who haven't read this book yet, I want to ask, and can you speak more about the Holocaust in Lithuania? Why the Holocaust in Lithuania is usually described as a special case, and what conditions makes the Holocaust in Lithuania as a special case compared with other countries?
Is this working? Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for the kind introductions. And in terms of answering the question, getting to the business of your question right away, I would say that, first of all, there's a chronological uniqueness to the Holocaust in Lithuania, because if you look at the process of the Holocaust in Europe, the earliest indications and actions which resulted and evolved into the total annihilation of communities rather than selective killing occurs here. And I know one historian has said that the town of Gargždai in western Lithuania, June 23rd, 1941, was actually the very first large-scale killing of Jews in the history of this country in that manner. And so, of course, as of August 1st, after that August 1st date, what began was the actual destruction of the Lithuanian Jewish community. As you know, in Poland, this occurred somewhat later and occurred in stages that were quite different. Now, we all have heard Father Dubois's phrase, the Holocaust by bullets. Most historians have known about this for a long time, of course. But the broad public, I think, both in the West but not here, always thinks of the Holocaust as being reflected in the camps of Auschwitz. And of course, here it was different. Another unique aspect, I think, which actually distinguishes the Holocaust in Lithuania from that in Poland, is the ability, unfortunately, of the German occupiers to induce and use the collaboration of numerous native, local, indigenous forces and structures to participate in the persecution, ghettoization, and destruction of the Jews. This is markedly different from Poland, because most Polish Jews who were not murdered by Poles, actually. So this is quite a different thing, whereas most Lithuanian Jews, unfortunately, and this has to be said, the brutal fact is that they were actually killed directly, not always, but in very large numbers by Lithuanians themselves under the command of the German forces. So this changes the way the Holocaust is viewed in the West quite a bit, I would say. And in the book, I try to use 3 stages of history in terms of the Holocaust. I made a slight error in my introduction. I said this is the story of a community. This isn't really the story of the Jewish community in Lithuania. It's the story of what happened to the Jewish community in Lithuania. There are many experts, including yourself and many others in Lithuania now, young people, who know far more about Jewish history, its culture, its religious traditions, its socioeconomic history than I do. But what I wanted to point out was the process and how it happened. And the reason for the title, in a way, is that if there's no crisis and no war, it doesn't happen. It is impossible to view the Holocaust in Lithuania without the Nazi occupation. And the question then is, why were more Jews killed in Lithuania in 1 week than during all the centuries of rather turbulent history of the past? And so when we look at the history and we have to deal with anti-Semitism and the processes before the war, we must remember that the anti-Semitism itself is a necessary but insufficient condition for the Holocaust. Genocide, as it evolves, requires structure, requires planning, requires decision-making. And that is why sometimes I avoid the word tragedy. I do use it from time to time when we talk about the Holocaust, because a tragedy can be a natural disaster. The Holocaust was a crime. It was what we call in America first-degree murder. It was decided, it was approved, it was carried out with purpose. And so to view these events solely through the prism of pogroms and violent emotions, I think misunderstands somewhat the true nature of all genocides in history. Because without the planning, without the politics of it, it doesn't happen the way that we saw here and also in the other grand 20th century crimes against humanity, whether we're talking about Rwanda, Cambodia, Ukraine in the 30s or whatever. So I wanted to make that point in the book. So the crisis, war, and Holocaust follows in sequence. In the crisis, the destruction of the states was important. Without the destruction of the independent states of Eastern Europe, particularly the Baltic states and Poland, it's very difficult to imagine the Holocaust happening, as you see. And also the war, I can't think of, in my mind, very quickly of a genocide that happens without war. In peacetime, particularly in a democratic society. So all these conditions have to be present as well. On the other hand, you can't simply look at the conditions, you have to evaluate the moral decision-making which occurs at the highest levels. So I tried to bring all that into the kind of a narrative that would be for the general reader. One more comment a little bit about how the book was born, so to speak. In the subcommission discussions that we had in Vilnius in 2016, it was decided that rather than issuing some sort of official report, there should be a general history for the reader who is not a historian but generally interested in history or in politics or in general life, written by a single author with the approval of course, the subcommission, and with help from reviewers and peers and all the rest, as in any normal academic, in democratic society, any normal academic function. And this is, I think, what we achieved. The book was reviewed, it was criticized, and I received great help from many, many people. There is not a single sentence in the book that has been either approved or looked at by any political figure in this country or in the United States. So I want to make that clear about the nature of the book itself. It's an academic publication, but written for the general reader, and it has no connection whatsoever to any political agenda or anything of this type. I tried to do that, so this is a rather long and rather confusing answer to your first question, but please.
Thank you. My next question is based and focused on the research. Your book is very detailed account about the Holocaust in Lithuania, and I know you worked on it for many years. But can you speak more about the progress and development of the research about the Holocaust in Lithuania? Do we still have gaps in the historiography about the Holocaust in Lithuania? Are there any aspects that historians should look more closely, more deeper?
Well, of course, there will always be gaps in the history because that is the nature of historical research. After all, every historian, to some extent, is a revisionist because without that, there would be no purpose for us to write new books. That doesn't mean we challenge that which is already known and clearly established. But, you know, there's a growing gap between what the public thinks it knows about the Holocaust and the specialists. This is worldwide. We have that in America on the Civil War and Reconstruction issues and elsewhere. But in terms of the historiography itself, one of the reasons I had to write this book was that in Lithuanian society, the society I grew up in the diaspora in the United States, everyone knew that there were Jews in Lithuania. They lived next to Lithuanians and they sold herring and matches to peasants and so on. And I studied part of that history in my dissertation on the 19th century peasantry of Užnemunė or Suvalkija. However, there was a wall of silence as to what happened to this community. And that wall of silence was pretty high and strong. And whenever it was breached even a little bit, it was then surrounded with all kinds of excuses and obfuscation. So as an example, in 1970, there was published in Chicago an English language book, History of the Lithuanian Nation. And the greatest instance of mass murder and violence in Lithuanian history in its concentrated form, the Holocaust, let's say between August and October of 1941, is mentioned in passing in one sentence. And so you can imagine that for any young person growing up in the diaspora, to find out that many people viewed Lithuanians as rather vicious people was a big shock. And so slowly, there were three sort of historiographic streams in the Holocaust until then, as you all know. One was in the Western version of the Holocaust. Then there was the Soviet narrative, and then there was the emigre diaspora narrative, which probably was the highest level of denial. Now, of course, since independence, that all changed. Once the archives were open, and there's a little bit of a humorous thing I can say here. I remember Lithuanians in America saying, well, when they open the archives, we are going to accept everything the archives tell us, whatever it says. This love, passionate love for the archives evaporated within a few months when it became apparent that the archives revealed not only heroic struggles of the Lithuanian nation for its freedom, but actually there were tens of thousands of pages in the archives which detailed an entirely different history of participation in mass murder and the destruction of the Jews. And so this, of course, is one of the reasons the historiography was so difficult. But I think we have good news. Beginning in the mid-90s, and I here would like to identify a colleague of mine, Valentinas Brandišauskas, who as a young man published a dissertation in 1995. I'm proud to say I was the chair of the committee of that in which he questioned this insurrection of 1941 and some of the myths that surround it. And also since then, we see a tremendous increase in the number of people in Lithuania who are qualified historians and academicians who have come upon Jewish history. Now, in a small country of less than 3 million, they may be 40, 50 or more people, and some of them have learned how to read Hebrew and Yiddish. So their professional preparation is without parallel. And I know this may sound strange, but I think right now, in 2025, the most extensive historical analysis of Jewish life in Lithuania since the earliest stages till now, and of the Holocaust, is being done by historians mostly living in Lithuania, most of them not Jewish Lithuanians. And so this has been a great, great change. And right now, I would say if we were to publish a bibliography, not of polemical, but academic works, peer-reviewed under academic structures, they would fill a book of articles and maybe even 20 large monographs and so on. So that is, now to compare, in 1923, there was a book published, Jewish Life in Lithuania, History by Augustinas Jaunulaitis, a historian, who then wrote in his preface to this little book that he hoped that Lithuanian historians would take up this issue themselves and study Jewish life in Lithuania. And just about very few people did. That situation now is no longer the one. And I think in terms of historiographic capability, there is enough intellectual power in this country to continue the research on the Holocaust, I think, in a way that has never been done before.
I would like to interrupt for a while our professor. I was informed that we have another greeting speech, and please listen to Professor Emeritus of Modern Jewish History at Tel Aviv University and the Chief Historian of Yad Vashem, Dina Porat.
Professor Sužiedėlis, congratulations, warm congratulations on this achievement. A book that will become the final word on the Holocaust in Lithuania. It is, first of all, in English. It's the first one to have been written in English. It is based on such a variety of sources that this is really an admirable academic achievement. I like the structure. There are 3 parts: before, then, and after, in which or with which you could cover the questions and the important periods before, during the Holocaust, and after. Most important is that this is a telling of the true story. You have confronted with courage the questions of the relationship between Lithuanians and Jews, other ethnic groups and Jews among themselves, and you have told the truth of what has happened in Lithuania during the Holocaust. Moreover, it is, I think, part of an effort to confront the tendency that we see now in Eastern Europe to try to change history, to rewrite it in a different way, which is not so accurate and not so according to what really happened. And you did a good job in giving us the true story. We, the members of the International Commission, spoke with you and among ourselves about the necessity of having such a book published from the beginning of our work. And we are very happy to see it accomplished. We hope all that we have contributed. Thank you for having sent us the manuscript to be read before you published. And I am joining my friend and colleague, Dr. Arkady Zelter, in saying that it is of high importance that the book is published in Lithuanian. And I would like to add that even a short version, the gist of it, in Lithuanian, meant for wider publics, high school students, would be of most importance. Thank you and congratulations again.
Thank you. We were facing the most interesting part of life events, so we can react at the update. So let's continue to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. My next question, you mentioned before how it was difficult to speak about the Holocaust among Lithuanian diaspora. And my next question is related with the memory of the Holocaust in Lithuania. In your book, you stress that the Holocaust is the bloodiest page in the history of modern Lithuania, which should occupy the central place in the memory of the nation's 20th century experience of wars and foreign occupations. However, this has not yet happened. What obstacles should we pass and what further steps should we take so the society will understand the Holocaust better? And has there been any progress made towards understanding the Holocaust as the biggest strategy in the history of modern Lithuania?
Yes, thank you for bringing up that question. It's a very difficult one, both from an emotional, political, and also a historical point of view. I would say that it's easy to prove that the Holocaust, the genocide of the Jews, was the bloodiest page in the history of our country. Let's remember that when the war began on June 22nd, and up till about the first week of August, just about that first period, yes, thousands of Jews were killed, and they were persecuted, and they were driven into camps and ghettos. Yet let's recall that on August 1st, something like close to 90% of all Jews in Lithuania were still alive. And had a decision not been made at that point, who knows what would have happened, but we know that by the end of 1941, about 4 out of every 5 Jews in Lithuania were dead. There's no such analog to that kind of concentrated killing, so it's obvious. Although if you say that to some audiences in this country and also in the diaspora, they get upset about it. What are the obstacles? One is chronological and is almost natural. In terms of World War II history, most of Lithuania's Jews died before the end of 1943. If you were an ethnic Lithuanian living in the 20th century, most of Lithuanians who died violently in the 20th century died after 1945, 1950. So the attention of people who concentrate on their own suffering among ethnic Lithuanians is somewhat naturally always pointed to the post-war period, right? After VE Day is when most ethnic Lithuanians were killed in the 20th century. So that's one of the natural causes in which people want to pay attention to their suffering and not someone else's. The other less natural cause, and one that is disturbing, is of course the continued existence of a form of anti-Semitism in this country, which, while it has weakened in many ways and in official ways, still has a resonance in the society, as proven, of course, by the electoral success of Mr. Žemaitaitis' political party. So that part of the obstacle is going to continue. I think the third obstacle is that the educational and tolerance programs which the Commission has and which many institutions have, both NGOs from abroad and here, are still not as effective as they should be. And these kind of changes take a great deal of time. So I do hope that, obviously, in the younger generation, there is less ethnic animosities, fewer anti-Semitic stereotypes, but they still exist. And so, I know that while government officials and people in the elites of this society know what to say in public, and I will never judge their sincerity. I know many of them are sincere, and some say things because they think it is good for NATO and EU consumption. So that problem is in the academy, it's solved because we have among historians, professional historians, among students in universities and so on, I think we have a fairly healthy, with some exceptions, attitude towards the past. Question is, how do we spread it out to the broader society? And I think this is where we should make perhaps additional efforts.
Professor, in many discussions, people, they come out with the question, if it is important, in your opinion, and why it is important that books about Holocaust in Lithuania are written by Lithuanians, that articles that are published about Holocaust in Lithuania is written by Lithuanians. Why and if it is important, in your opinion?
Well, from a very human standpoint, I think that when I speak in the diaspora sometimes, I think I do get some more credibility by being one of them. I think that's a natural reaction among many people. I can trust you more than someone who comes from Western Europe or particularly has Jewish roots. Well, you know, this idea that there's bias built in. But I think also, I take it from a somewhat different perspective. I think that it is healthy and natural that we write about the Holocaust because it is our history, it's not Jewish history. It's the history of the Lithuanian people as well, and it should be taught as such, so that these are not two separate worlds. Of course, Jews and Lithuanians lived side by side, not so much with each other as Isaac Bashevis Singer once said about Polish Jews. We know that. But anyway, the possibilities of cultural cooperation were there in the 1930s. They did exist. And I mean, that like Augustinas Jonulaitis said back in 1923, he said, we should study this history as well because it's our history of our state. History of our communities, all the national communities of this country. And I think when we do that, Lithuanian students, Lithuanian school children will say, oh, okay, so these other people are, in a sense, Lithuanians as well. I know that in the Lithuanian language, the word Lietuvis Lithuanian means ethnic Lithuanian. I wish it weren't so. I would start a campaign to say that we should add the word Lietuvis to everyone who is a Lithuanian citizen, like we do in America. You know, not that America these days is a great example of democracy, but I mean, you know what I mean. So that so I think that the question in a way answers itself. It's natural, as in other countries, that we should study our own history and this should be part of our past. And I don't agree with the idea that if we accept this painful past, in which we have to admit that not only did common people in large numbers fail the test of morality, but some of our elites in the government, in the church, in other institutions fail this test. To accept that, I don't think that reduces patriotism among younger people, right? We've been teaching American students about the genocide of the American Indians for many years, and I don't notice any less patriotism among them. So I don't think that's a valid argument. So I would say that, and that's why I really am proud of the fact that most of the research on Jewish history right now and the Holocaust is done by Lithuanian scholars. And I have to put a shout out, and very proud of our younger generation of historians. And we have Aurimas, and we have Zigmas Vitkus, we have Stanislovas Stasiulis, we have Justinas Stončius. I could name a whole bunch of people who have done exceptional work on this history that until now, very few Lithuanian historians have ever touched these topics. So I think that should be an optimistic note.
Thank you a lot. Okay, our time is little by little is running out, and I would like if somebody from the audience would have any questions for Professor.
Labą dieną, my name is Dinesh András Nagy. I'm the Deputy Head of Mission of the Hungarian Embassy in Vilnius, and as a fellow historian, may I congratulate you on the book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And I have a specific question regarding a particular person. In Hungary, when we look at this period in time, we honor those who fought both the Nazis and the Soviets. And it is very difficult to find those persons who were principled and fought both. We have Endre Wojciech-Zieliński, for instance, as one example. And here in Lithuania, the Lithuanians have many proud heroes who fought the Soviet occupiers, but the difficulty is that, like Hungary, Lithuania was on one side in the Second World War. So may I ask of your personal opinion about Vytautas Gužas, with the nom de guerre Kardas, who was a signatory of the Lithuanian freedom fighters movement in 1949, because he is very dear to us Hungarians because he used the nom de guerre Kardas, which is from the Hungarian word kard. It means sword, because in Hungarian, hand is kar. So what you hold in your hand to fight is kard, or in your language, kardas. This is one of the many words from Hungarian that entered the Lithuanian language during Bátori István's time, Stepanas Bátoras. So can we look to Vytautas Gužas Kardas as somebody that we can all be proud of, as somebody who fought the Soviets, but who is acceptable from the perspective of the Holocaust? Thank you.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough about Gužas to answer that question about that person. I do know a little bit about the question of Jonas Noreika and also others, Vanagas and so on. And sometimes these are complicated personalities, but also controversial. So I can't answer that question. Maybe Professor Stasiulis or somebody else would be able to do that. I don't feel competent enough to answer that. I have not studied the post-war resistance at length, and I don't remember that name in terms of activities under the German occupation. But I'll certainly look it up. And no historian knows everything. And that's why we keep learning and revising. But I will take that question into consideration, and if you work at the Embassy of Hungary, I will find someone in the History Institute, and Aurimas will help me, who will help us towards those people who are specialists in the period of the late 1940s and who are familiar with all the personalities thereof. Thank you.
Dear Saulius, my question will be just related to the 80th year of anniversary of uprising in Warsaw Ghetto. Just one 2 years ago and commemorated in Warsaw 80 years of Vilna Ghetto, and about those persons who were involved in anti-Nazi resistance in Vilna Ghetto, in Kaunas, in probably a little bit in Šiauliai, so, and righteous people. So, how you value the resolution of Lithuanian Parliament, where you have a point that the heroes of resistance of Vilna Ghetto, people who were probably even going against the common opinion to survive one day more, especially among ghetto population, and choose the resistant points to resist, few guns in this united partisan organization inside of ghetto. I'm talking not about the woods, I'm talking about ghetto in himself. How you count the idea just reflected by the common vote of Lithuanian Parliament, one line, to make them heroes of Lithuania, anti-Nazi resistant heroes. Those few guys actually mentioned by German ambassador during his last speech to public in one line, anti-Nazi resistance, means anti-Third Reich resistance. So how to commemorate Second World War, and who are the heroes of anti-Nazi resistance in Lithuania, including righteous people, of course, but including the ghetto heroes who were committed to that. Thank you.
I have heard of, and I haven't read the detailed text of the resolution, but of course, and I deal with it in the book in chapter 5, I do deal with the ghettos, and also because the resistance came out of the ghetto in Vilnius and Kaunas and Šiauliai, well, in Švenčionys as well, with Yičakarad. So, yes, and Dina Parad's book on Abba Kovner was very helpful for me to understand, the beginnings of it. I welcome this, but you see, there is a problem with the anti-Nazi partisans and Soviet partisans, because among much of the Lithuanian population, that is not recognized, the anti-Nazi resistance, and I can tell you why. The term anti-fascism, which is felt strongly in the West and has a specific meaning. If you ask, you would have asked my parents or people of that generation, what kind of anti-fascist did you know? Stalinist. So anti-fascism in and of itself does not create this warm feeling, depending on who it is. So that the geopolitical sort of looks, the geopolitical orientations of the different nations of Lithuania were tragically at odds. Because for the Jewish partisans, a Soviet victory was essential for survival. Well, for Lithuanians, it was not. I mean, and so these were the enemies. And so beginning in 1940-41, these geopolitical orientations began to clash. They were incompatible. And the poor Poles, for them, neither the Soviets nor the Nazis were an acceptable alternative. I mean, they were trapped. So that this begins in 1940, when you destroy the state. What happens with people? They begin to look for alternatives. And the reality was that the alternatives were what they were. And we talked about the insurrection or whatever. I mean, when the Germans attacked on June 22nd, people threw flowers at the Germans, right? When the Soviets entered Kaunas, many Lithuanians remember Jewish, particularly young people, not older people, throwing flowers at the Soviet tanks. These narratives exist to this day. They are part of the, what I call the paradigm of memory. And memory is not subject to historical analysis. In fact, it opposes it to some extent. You don't question it. So in that case, you see what we had in the commission when we had the problem with the case of Yičakarad being accused. This was done because, I think, for cynical purposes, because it resonated among a certain memory. And that's what was the power of that provocation. And there's no easy answer to that, because you can say, well, let's have a shared history. well, can you share a history that is so different? I find it difficult. Now, I agree, though, that on the level of morality and in commemoration, we must commemorate the Jewish partisans who went to the forests of Rudniki and fought. There's no question there. They sacrificed their lives for a noble cause.
And ghetto, United
Yes, right. Yeah, they came from, as I put in my book, they came from the ghettos to the forests. Right. And here's another tragic side to that partisan story. The Soviet partisans didn't always welcome these Jewish newcomers. In fact, sometimes they killed them on some occasions. There is a story in the book by Svetlana Alexeyeva, the Belarusian writer, about a poor Jewish woman who was raped and murdered by the Soviet partisans, you see. So technically they're, of course, allies, absolutely, but we have the documentation in a recent study from the archives that shows a very different story. And this is what I mean why historians must sometimes revise the narrative. This story of the friendship of nations fighting together under the Soviet leadership against fascism is really a very, very questionable tale. The situation was much more complex, and particularly in the countryside to the east of the city. So the Jewish fighters who went from the ghetto to the forests faced tremendous obstacles and dangers. And that's why so many of them did not survive in the fight. But I agree with you in terms of our commemoration. When we commemorate heroes, I put them in the pantheon of heroes, of course. All I'm saying is sometimes it's difficult to explain to Lithuanians who lived in the forests of east of here why they were heroes. And that's a reality. We can't escape that. And we have to simply educate people and hope for a better understanding. You raise a very important question and a very painful question historically. Yes, and that's, I write about it in the book. To give you one specific example, in Yitzhak Arad's memoir, The Tragedy, you know that the Home Army, the Polish Home Army, was one of the largest anti-Nazi movements in Europe, maybe the largest in terms of number. Well, Yitzhak Arad is a partisan young man. He escapes from Shvenčionys into the forest, is fighting. He goes into a Polish house and sees that the woman is nervous, doesn't know why, and then discovers in walks a Polish Home Army lieutenant in his cap, typical Polish cap and so on. Of course, they arrest him right there. They're both anti-Nazi fighters, Arad and the Polish lieutenant. So they take the Polish lieutenant, they take him to the Soviet base where they torture and kill him. How do you explain now to a Westerner about the anti-Nazi resistance when you have something like this? It's extremely complicated on that level. So, all guerrilla wars are ugly and vicious, without a doubt, particularly against civilians. So what we have to do is say, okay, people fight heroically, but there was a price for that. And remember that the Jewish partisans and anti-Soviet partisans would nickname the Polish Home Army, an anti-Nazi organization, as white, white bandits. White meaning the Polish colors. The Home Army, I saw documents, several documents, where they called the Jewish anti-Nazi fighters as bands of terrorists. This is how they call each other. So think of, this narrative is difficult. And it brings up so many memories, particularly the older generation. I think it's possible to explain it to a younger generation with some understanding, and we can get at a better history. But, well, thank you for pointing that out, because it's one of the things that we just have to deal with that is extremely unpleasant. I hope I made myself clear.
Arkadius Vinokuras.
Thank you. Talking about the anti-Nazi resistance, as you and all of us knows very well, that in Lithuania, part of historians talking about anti-Nazi resistance we call the Lithuanian underground during 1942, 43 until 44. And this kind of is a big thing, a narrative that shows that even Lithuanians had anti-Nazi resistance. So what's we know very well also many of those who became kind of anti-Nazi resistance took part also in persecuting Jews. So what is your opinion? Do you write about that in your book? I haven't read it yet. What's your opinion on that?
It's in the book. There is the opinion on the anti-Nazi. The book was not, I write in the book that there's not enough space to do an exhaustive analysis. It wasn't my purpose about the Lithuanian anti-Nazi movement, but I write about it, particularly from the point of view of the illegal press between 1942 and 44, and how that press never really talked much about the Jewish Holocaust and was very defensive on that issue. Yeah. So, I mean, the anti-Nazi movement of ethnic Lithuanians under the German occupation, their whole purpose, our whole purpose was to survive until the Soviets would be stopped, and then the Western allies would magically come in and push out the Soviets. This is a crazy illusion, but it was the illusion of my parents and most Lithuanians. I know it doesn't make sense to a Westerner, but if you lived here, it would. Because most people of my parents' generation remember World War I. Germany defeats Russia, and then the Western Allies defeat Germany. That's the best outcome of all for the countries of Eastern Europe. Repeat what happened after 1918. So that's where the anti-Nazi resistance of the Lithuanians was at that time. But what was the purpose from their point of view? They couldn't work with the Poles because of the Vilnius issue. The anti-Nazi partisans, the Jewish anti-Nazi partisans, were with the Soviets. So that was a no-go. So, you know, all these three different groups, anti-Nazi groups, do not share the same geopolitical purpose. And therefore, it's not surprising that their behavior was the way it was. But I think the more, to me, problematic part of the Lithuanian anti-Nazi press after 1941, 42, 43 was their rather indifference to the killing of the Jews. There's very little about it, you know. If they close a Lithuanian high school, they say, this is barbarism. These Germans are worse than the Bolsheviks. That's a big insult. But they would describe what happened in Šiauliai in the children's action in maybe 2 or 3 sentences, rather laconically. So, yeah, that's been studied, by the way. This is not a topic that has been ignored by Lithuanian younger historians, I'm glad to say. So, you know, I hope I answered that question.
Hi, I'm Jonas Kulikauskas, an American Lithuanian, an artist. It's really good to see you, Dr. Sužiedėlis. I've always related to your work because I think we both have one foot in America and one foot here. And you mentioned in the beginning of your talk about a history book that had one sentence about the Holocaust in Lithuania. And I'm part of that generation. I know, I went to Lithuanian school where our history book, out of 17 pages of World War II, had 0 sentences about the Holocaust. Right? And then I took my son to the same school a generation later, and he learned nothing about the Holocaust. Right? So here we are. And your book is a history book, but I think this leads to Holocaust education. So my question is, you know, outside of Lithuania, we have maybe 1 million Lithuanians. There's a network of schools, communities, parishes, and I see you on YouTube. I know that you're out there doing the good work. But is there an education premise you envision with this community, either here, or do we look to Lithuania for inspiration. I'm looking for guidance. Thank you.
Oh, I have to disappoint you in this regard. I received letters from some people in bendruomenė community that it's still not the history they want is a history of glory and Lithuanian, fight for freedom without mentioning the Jews hardly at all. I think that in Lithuania the situation is much, much better than it is in the diaspora, particularly the diaspora of longer standing. It's just, it's like hitting your head against the wall in a way. Even in those parts of the diaspora which might be more progressive, like the Washington, D.C. Lithuanian school system, or in Baltimore and places like that, you meet people your age and they say, yes, we should study this because it's the right thing to do, and then nothing happens. And part of it is also that history being taught is limited. The children going to these schools no longer speak Lithuanian very well, usually, or some of them not at all. So it's problematic. I would think that, this is where Lithuania could, the government of Lithuania and the institutions here could extend some foreign aid to our brethren in the United States and elsewhere, Canada, and really help out, because from there I expect nothing. There are people who are well-intentioned and would do it. They just don't have the support underneath them to do something, the infrastructure educationally, even when there's a desire to do it, and among a large part of the people, there's no desire at all. And there's considerable ignorance about the Holocaust in Lithuania there. So, I wish I could tell you a better story. But the historians don't, we don't tell history to make you feel good. We just hope that, we're telling the truth exactly. Well, not exactly, but as best as we can to what actually happened. And I do have to say against my friend Dina Porat that this isn't the final word. You should never write a book and say it's the final word. You'll get into trouble if you do that. This is the first word, I hope, in many, many more books. And again, I want to stress how very, I had such good companionship among the younger historians the last few years. They sent me books, they sent me articles, they asked questions, they gave me answers for my questions. The cooperation, the interaction was extremely helpful. And now that the older generation is leaving the scene, I think that they're more than capable of, putting their shoulder to the wheel and moving this forward.
Professor, greetings from Paul Landsbergis. He's our friend who suggested we come here. I had the honor of reading your book, but it was too thick to put in my suitcase to get your autograph. Sorry about that. My question, the period that you did about describing the ghetto, the Jewish ghetto, the administration of the ghetto, the resistance, the building of culture, all those were things. Are those all new things to us to know deeply, both from the archives and also from personal accounts of that period of history within how the ghetto operated?
Not really. That history has already been pretty well covered and more written since about the late 50s and 60s. Remember the context. The first huge work on the Holocaust was Raoul Hilberg's 1961 book, The Destruction of the European Jews. It's an incomparably magnificent work with only one problem that created a few minor issues. He used almost exclusively German sources in talking about the Holocaust, particularly in Eastern Europe. But aside from that, it was explosive, important book for the early 60s and was the model for much. I still use his model of genocide, the 4 stages in it. Now for the ghetto and so on, no, there's a lot been done. A little more here. The diary of Viechek Rudaševsky was published here in Lithuania, but that was already known. And a new book has come out about the Šiauliai ghetto, but some of that material was already known in Israel, and partly because survivors from these ghettos, when they went to Israel or later, they published a lot of memoirs and material. I will honestly say, and I was asked about this, and I said that the least original part of my book is chapter 5, because I used fewer news sources. A lot of that's based on work that's already been done, secondary sources, and the most difficult chapter was chapter 6, actually, in many ways, from a methodological and other viewpoint in terms of sources and everything else. So no, that's not, and Jewish anti-Nazi resistance, that has been well covered. There is a new, somewhat contentious, but really valuable book on the anti-Nazi Soviet partisans in which the Jews formed a part. They were later integrated into the Soviet partisan forces, not entirely, but they worked together, by Rimantas Zizas. And that uses all kinds of new sources that have not been published yet and are new to the scholars who have studied this issue. You know, the thing is that in Lithuanian archives, in the Central State Archive and so on, I wouldn't know how many, you can probably guess, Dr. Stasiulis, I would say there are many thousands of pages of information from the local governmental structures under the German occupation that had not been used until 1990 in writing the history. And of course, Western scholars, without a knowledge of the language and not being able to enter libraries and archives here freely, they were blocked from this. And this is why you get, I describe in my book, all these little errors in Western accounts of Holocaust in Lithuania, even in Hilberg's book. They don't have the ability to look and say, okay, you know, here's the details. So thank you for the question. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll try to ask, not to not to offend anybody, but you have raised yourself a question about that what is quite important for us, for Jews, that in United States are living Americans, and in Israel are living Israelis, and in Switzerland are living Swiss people. Here in Lithuania, there are Lithuanians, Jews, though they are all the citizens of Lithuania. So what do you think in the future? Is it possible for me, without any very negative reaction of my Jewish community, to tell that I'm Lithuanian Jewish origin? Or you can, or you have another thoughts on it? And also from the political side, I'm very sorry that the Minister of Foreign Affairs left. But we have such organization as Lithuanian organization, Lithuanians who live abroad organization. Jews are not the members of this organization.
I didn't hear which organization you speak of.
Lietuvos pasaulio lietuvių bendruomenė.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jews are not the members of this organization. Though then I am in United States, I can't see any disagreements or between Jews and Lithuanians, but this maybe why I asked this question, not only because you opened it, but because it is, my opinion, is from the Holocaust, from maybe pre-Holocaust period. Then the Jews are Jews, and Lithuanians are Lithuanians.
Sure. Well, there's a historic answer to that, I think, that is not only specific to Lithuania. as you know, from the 19th century and even earlier, this was a country of communities. You belonged to a certain community, and if you were not a person. So that you had, for example, under the agrarian structures, every community had people identified themselves by religious communities. So that if you were Catholic, you were Polish Lithuanian. You were Jewish or Karaim. If you were Protestant, you were likely German. If you were Orthodox, you were 95%, you were Russian. And so everybody belonged to their community. Now, when the new modern state was created in 1918 to 1920, these categories still existed. So, and they also were economically focused, so that most people who were merchants were Jews, Germans, or Poles. Almost 5% Lithuanians. Most people who were landowners were Poles. Most people who were in the Western country landowners were Germans. All Protestants were either Germans or Lithuanians with German roots, and in most cases, except for near the birželio. So, this doesn't disappear overnight. I mean, if you look at the history of the 1920s in Kaunas, there's a wonderful book by Mindaugas Balkas called Kaip Kaunas tapo Kaunu, or something like that. It took the state about 10 years to make Lithuanian. Lithuanian had never been the official language of the country in its entire history until 1918. The majority population, which was economically and culturally marginalized. Most people in the clergy, in business, and so on were not ethnic Lithuanians. Only of all real estate owners in Kaunas city who owned real estate, only 6% were Lithuanians. I mean, this was the reality of the society. To try to create a situation where you can change the language Lietuvis is also someone who does not have Lietuvis roots is a big task even today. So I have to give a little funny aside to this. My nephew, Darius Sužiedėlis, when he applied for Lithuanian citizenship, there's a little sentence that says, "What's your nationality?" And he said, they asked him, "Okay, what's your nationality?" He says, "American." So in his Lithuanian passport, he wanted to put, "I'm a Lithuanian citizen, but my nationality is American," which they laughed at and they wouldn't believe, and they didn't let him do it because it's just too strange. So we're dealing here with this. Now, I would prefer in my modern life, and I'm sure some young people who are well educated and progressive would say, let's simply use the word Lietuvis for someone who is an ethnic Lithuanian or someone who is a non-ethnic Lithuanian but of other roots, just like we do in America. I'm Žydų kilmės Lietuvis. I'm a Lithuanian of Jewish faith or Jewish origin, just like assimilated Polish Jews would say, I am a Pole of the Mosaic faith. And that's the way, or Germans would say in the 1930s even, I am a German of Mosaic faith. They thought they were Germans, and safe. Or Hungarians often, in Hungary, Jews were very much assimilated between the wars. So it's an impossible dilemma. Now, among older people, you just, I've run into this problem again, trying to explain to people outside Lithuania why we use that one word the way we do. And there are historic reasons for it. I prefer that it not be that way. I can't see how you can change it very easily in terms of the spoken speech and customs of the people.
Thank you so much. And now I'm afraid that time for that presentation has run out. I would like to thank all of you. I will thank Your Excellencies ambassadors, members of parliament, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Saulius Sužiedėlis, and I really hope that you will find his book on the publisher's page. You can look, you can read, and you can find a lot of interesting things. Thank you. One more time.
Just one thing, if I could. It's I think it's on the webpage of it's open access, which is financed by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. They were good enough to give me a subvention to pay for the open access. And it's under University Public Library, something open. If you Google it, you can actually download the entire PDF just as it would be here. It's the same text, the same photos, the same layout. and you can read it for free. But so, you know, please reduce my honorarium.
Thank you so much.